All right, to speak more on the opening of a Parliament tomorrow, we now bring in political analyst, Professor Dirk Kotze. Prof, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So tomorrow's opening of Parliament will, see essentially President Cyril Ramaphosa use this opportunity and his opening address to outline key priorities for the 7th administration, we're told. I mean, what are we likely then to witness tomorrow, especially given the significant changes that the government of national unity bring, now affording political parties to share power after the May elections?
Yeah, I think what we can expect is something similar to the SONA, the State of the Nation address, although this is not anymore called the SONA speech. It's now opening of Parliament after the election. But it will have more or less the same content, I would say, and therefore it will focus a lot on what you've now mentioned, the different priorities, and it will start with economy. The economic matters always dominate these type of speeches. So that is, I think, is going to be a very important focus, both for presenting it to Parliament, but also presenting it to the South African public in general and to the international community. So it's a big audience that President Ramaphosa must take into account when he is going to address this. At the same time, what he normally does, and previous presidents also, is actually to go through all the ministries and all the departments and make some observations about specific aspects that might become or will be important for the rest of the year. Because we are in a relatively unique situation that we are also almost halfway through the year already. And now he has to make a pronouncement on policies that is going to be implemented until the next budget, which will be early next year, when there will be the opportunity to look at new policy or different policy components also. So I think what he's going to present now is what is referred to as the medium-term policy framework, which means for the next 5 years, plus then specifically for what we can expect for the rest of this year, of the 2024 financial year. I think what we can also expect is that he will give us some indication already of how the government of national unity is going to work. Because it's obviously a new concept now. 1994, it had its very particular function, but now it serves as a government of national unity as well as a coalition, because there's no party anymore with a majority in this government. And I think in that respect, it is important that he spells out what were some of the discussions that happened last week and over the weekend at the Cabinet Lekgotla, and what are some of the aspects that we can therefore as the public take into account. The one thing we should not expect is too much detail. These type of speeches never provide detailed timelines and so on to a large extent.
Yeah, and I mean, Prof,
it also does not provide... Yes?
No, continue. It doesn't also provide?
And it doesn't provide so much detail about policy matters. So we must not necessarily expect that.
And I think, Prof, it's a good thing, to draw those differences then in terms of the opening of Parliament as well as the State of the Nation address. But just in terms of what you are talking about, in terms of what to expect, I mean, when we look at the speech that was then, conducted by President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2019, I mean, then it was, of course, the ANC-led government. It introduced 7 key priorities at the time. I'm just going to draw out 2, namely the economic transformation and spatial integration as well as human settlements. The ANC with 40% of the voter share now, I mean, how likely are we to see continuity under this administration? I know you're saying that we're not going to see detail per se, but what are the key things that he should be mentioning in this particular opening?
I think despite everything that happened in the election, there's going to be quite a lot of continuity of the ANC's policies. I think what we've heard already, what happened at the Lekgotla, is that there was a presentation made by the Directors General in which they identified the commonalities between the different parties. And there was really a lot of them. So it doesn't mean it's a choice of ANC policies versus other policies. It's rather a choice of where are the common elements which are by implication support already by the different parties. I think what President Ramaphosa will maybe put on the back burner for tomorrow is to look at the more controversial aspects, that he will maybe not make explicit pronouncements on those so much, but rather concentrate on the areas where there's already by implication agreement between the different parties.
You know, when we speak about the government of national unity, the issue of accountability keeps coming up as an important, concern. I mean, the concern, of course, is centered in terms of how this will be then enforced under the GNU.
Yes, this is something which I think they will have to develop as a concept. It's something which in 1994, a whole document was developed by the Secretary of Cabinet then, Professor James Gerber, which is still available and can be used to a large extent for this current situation also. Section 92 of the Constitution says that all ministers of the Cabinet are collectively and individually accountable for what they are doing. So it means that they take decisions as a cabinet and take responsibility for those decisions. But they are also individually responsible for their portfolios, for example, in relation to Parliament. So it means that parties cannot take individual positions when they are members of this cabinet. They have to do it within the context of the cabinet as a whole. Cabinet is functioned or is based on a number of clusters. For example, the social welfare cluster, the security cluster, the economic cluster, and so on. And that's where the ministries are coming together. There's another layer where the DGs are coming together in order to develop common policies. So it's very seldom that a ministry or a minister can take policy decisions on their own. It's almost impossible to do it, even before this current dispensation of the government of national unity. So I expect that that form of operation will continue, which means that it will integrate the different ministries and ministers in order to work together. Many of these ministers also come from one party and the deputy minister from another party. So it's not that one party actually controls these ministries or departments. These are all meant in order to have a sort of a cross-section or that will promote collective accountability and not necessarily only individual accountability.
Prof, just given what you had earlier said in terms of, we won't necessarily see any major decision taken, especially around policy. I want to talk, though, about just, the markets itself. I mean, given the sensitivity of the markets ahead of the elections and, during the discussions with the various political parties before forming the GNU, one can only imagine they would want to see significant, or wouldn't rather want to see significant policy change, but rather a speech that is more pro-growth, that has pro-growth priorities in it and would entail, would that be something that the president would be concerned with and want to perhaps clarify during this particular speech?
Yes, most certainly. And I think what he wants, he will have to develop a very fine balance between introducing a sort of a sense of that there's a renewal, if I can use his own concept, but at the same time that there's consistency, there's policy predictability, because that's the one thing that especially the economy, international economists or business people so don't want is uncertainty. So it will create that, I think it will bring that sense of certainty, but at the same time also the sense that there is room for new policy development over time. But it's not, and then at the same time, I think that will be hugely important is to create the impression that President Ramaphosa will create that there's stability in government, that there's not a polarization within the government of national unity, that there's not this a disconnection between the members of the coalition, but that they are willing and able to work together. That will be a very important message.
Yeah. Prof, thank you so much for your time and, of course, your analysis, political analyst, Professor Dirk Kotze, there for us.